Welcome to the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Tirapelli, bariatric sports dietitian. Today, I am so honored to bring on my friend and colleague, Megan Moore. Megan is a bariatric dietitian helping women eat confidently and lose more weight after bariatric surgery. She is the best-selling author of the Complete Bariatric Cookbook and Meal Plan and is a nationally sought-after speaker on all topics of nutrition after bariatric surgery. You'll often find her enjoying time with her husband and son at their home near Seattle, catching up on podcasts during a morning walk, or planning her next themed dinner party for her friends. Thanks so much for being here today, Megan. I'm so glad you're on.
Thanks for having me, Kim. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I always love talking to other bariatric dietitians and just getting your perspective and kind of your area of expertise, also so folks can learn more about you and who you work with and that kind of thing. So I'm so glad that you could be on.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us, just so folks get to know you a little bit more, tell us a little bit about how did you get into bariatric nutrition as a dietitian and what drew you to this specialty field of nutrition?
Yeah. And I get this question a lot because I think it's such a good one because obviously bariatrics is kind of its own unique specialty, right? But as I got into nutrition after actually starting in kind of like college in a genetics field, and I was super interested in science and just like kind of loved learning how, things worked, but, more internally. And I started to kind of like dabble in this like interest in what's called like nutrigenomics, which is, how our nutrition impacts our genome. And then I started really kind of thinking that, nutrition is actually like a lot more interesting to me. Like the genetic piece is so fascinating, but I want to like have something a little bit more tangible, and food was a little bit more tangible in that way. And obviously so interesting in how it impacted people's health and, their wellness and whatnot. So I switched fields. And as I was a baby dietitian in my internship, trying to, finish my degree and get licensed, I was actually living with my best friend at the time and, going through all of my rotations as a dietitian in my internship. And she came to me one day and was like, I just want you to know I'm going to have bariatric surgery. And so that was like kind of new to me. I was actually in my rotation learning about bariatric surgery, but it was kind of a foreign language, right? Like it was all new to me. So to go through schooling and to learn about it, but then to see firsthand, like the changes that she had to make, and she was trying all the different vitamins and protein shakes. And, so I was kind of like watching her go through everything. And then obviously to see, how that impacted her life was so amazing. And that was, like almost 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's not where I started my my career, but when I had the opportunity to apply for a job in bariatrics, I took it. And I've been doing that for 11 years. So loved it.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have your own practice now. Like, tell us a little bit about that. How did you move from like working in a hospital to what you're doing now? Yeah.
So I worked for a few different surgical centers in like the Seattle area. And I really loved it. I worked with people both pre-op and post-op, and obviously different surgery types and different health conditions. But just for fun, I started kind of like blogging on the side and just trying to kind of create some extra resources for my clients, some recipes and, blog articles and things like that they could read outside of, the clinic time. And obviously for anyone who's gone through surgery and who's gone through, the process of working with a surgical center or a hospital, you just don't really get that much time with your surgical team. And I had such great relationships with my patients, but I just felt like there was something missing. And I really felt like they deserved so much more support and more personalization. And so I kind of started dabbling, just taking people kind of as clients on the side. And then it turned into what it is now. So yeah, I help people pre-op and post-op. And a lot of my clients are further along post-op. But I love every stage of it. And it's just so wonderful to be able to empower people with knowledge and skills and tools to be able to really maximize their success post-op. So.
Right. Yeah. I totally relate to what you're saying, because that was kind of my experience as well when I moved from the outpatient surgical center that I was at for the last 10 years. I just always felt like I wanted to see them more. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to be able to work with them more frequently. And of course, when you work in a busy surgical center, you don't have that opportunity because your schedule is, I'd be booked out a couple months, in advance for patients, pre and post op. And so I totally hear you. That's kind of how I ended up going into my own private practice as well, because not only because I wanted to be able to work more individually with folks so that we could really tailor their nutrition plans to meet their, training and fitness goals, but also because I just felt like in my particular area, there was no straight recommendations out there on how to change nutrition to fuel movement. You know what I mean? And so I really wanted to explore that and be more specialized in that area. What's kind of the area that you focus on most with your clients right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do have a lot of clients who are in that newly post-op stage who maybe just, for whatever reason, their surgical center doesn't provide a whole lot of post-op support. And so from the beginning, they just feel very lost and confused about things. They were given 2 pages of here's your post-op diet. Good luck. But a lot of my clients are also those who are farther out, who have, maybe they didn't have the best relationship with the team at their surgical center. Maybe they just didn't really vibe with anybody, and they're looking for that support, or they're really just looking for ways to get back on track. They're feeling like they've hit a stall. They feel like they're dealing with regain. Old habits are creeping back in, and they're trying to be really mindful about, their big term health and wellness goals. And they're looking for some extra, more, again, individualized support, but that extra accountability piece, and just really having a little bit more, thorough understanding of how to support themselves other than just eat 60 grams of protein a day. Right.
Yes.
So,
what does that mean? Yes.
Yeah, they're really I kind of work with everybody, but I would say a lot of individuals are definitely coming to me who are a little bit farther along post-op.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. And so just to kind of dive into some topics, because, I thought it'd be kind of fun today for us to kind of go into some different areas that you and I both deal with our clientele, and maybe share each of our, experiences, philosophies, how do we, address certain topics. And so I wanted to ask first, if it's okay, what are some of the biggest nutrition questions that you get, from bariatric clients that you work with right now?
Yeah, I would say I definitely get questions a lot about, why is my weight loss slowed down? Why is my weight loss, or why am I stalling? Right. What are the reasons for it? I've been maybe in a stall now for a month. What's the reason? Or how do I just get back on track? I'm not feeling very motivated, how do I kind of break out of some old habits or behaviors? But even too, I've gotten questions people are worried that maybe they've stretched out their pouch, they can eat more, and they're concerned about that. There's a fear of, there's a lot of fear, right, in this post-op stage, a fear of weight regain, a fear of messing things up, a fear of, potentially eating more calories, right? And so a lot of times too, people can be doing great, but even there's that anxiety or fear piece about going backwards. And sometimes it's even just validating, right? That what they're doing is fantastic. So but yeah, a lot of the questions I get are, how can I meet my goals, my nutritional goals more easily? How can I stay consistent? How can I, navigate those challenges stalls, regain, and just really make myself successful, but in a way that doesn't feel, just so full of anxiety and stress too.
Totally. And I was going to say something that I feel like goes along with that is, because most surgical centers kind of, discharge, so to speak, a patient after, maybe up to a year, maybe even 2 years. A lot of the things that you're mentioning that people ask you are usually things that come up down the road. And it's like, now I don't have anyone to ask because I'm not even going to that clinic anymore. You know what I mean? And so it can be be a little bit frustrating and or give you anxiety because it's like, who do I turn to? You know what I mean? And I think some of the benefits of, I don't want to say benefits of COVID, but what happened with the COVID era where folks were able to do a lot more things online, virtual, and now more care is available online. That's what I think is so cool now is that you really can get assistance, especially from registered dietitians who specialize in the area that you're having questions about, online now, which is great because you can meet them in the comfort of your home. There's classes and programs and I think, there's just so much more, help out there that can, be found, certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I feel bad too, because sometimes people will say, I've reached out to my center, I'm still in contact with them, but they're not returning my calls, or it's like a 3-month wait to get back in, or I meet with somebody like the dietitian and I'm given 15 minutes. And, I just feel like everyone deserves so much more than that.
I agree.
And just having, whether that's a dietitian or whether that's even a psychologist that specializes in bariatric support, right? Whatever team member that you feel like you need or that collection, we're lucky that so much of that is more available these days online.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So, and I was just going to say some of the questions that I get, of course, for my, area is going to be, when should I start incorporating, maybe more carbohydrate, or is it okay to be eating a little bit more when I'm, working out 5-6 times a week? When is it appropriate? What point, how many days a week, before I should start increasing, my intake? I get that question quite a bit, as well as folks kind of having stress around when they do see the scale increase as they begin exercising more and understanding the contributing factors to why the number on the scale may increase. Is it because you are retaining some additional water due to inflammation from these tough workouts? Is it because you've gained some muscle mass, which is awesome? Is it because you have incorporated a little bit more carbohydrate and your glycogen stores are increasing, which, also draws in water? You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I know I get a lot of, my area is going to be focused on more of those types of questions. And I just feel like I think as, hopefully more research in just metabolic and bariatric surgery with the GLP-1s coming along now, I feel like there's a lot more spotlight now on treatments for the disease of obesity. And I feel like it's an exciting time, with a lot of these new things, being brought to folks to be able to try new tools, I should say. And then having folks like, yourself, myself, other dietitians that are able there to support folks. I think it's an exciting time, to be able to be a part of this area of nutrition.
Yeah. And what I always tell my clients too is, there's not a one size fits all approach to the post-op life. But that especially is true because so many people have completely different goals, right? And so if you're getting into that active bariatric lifestyle, right, and your goals could look entirely different than somebody else's. And so your needs are we have to make sure that your needs are really personalized to support the goals and what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And so, and even just to get that guidance too, and that reassurance that you're on the right track, because I see that with my clients too, as they are adding in, exercise and they're working out, they'll notice those quote unquote stalls or quote unquote plateaus. Right. And it's their body is still changing, but the scale doesn't necessarily show it. So having those conversations with somebody so that you can just be reassured that you're on the right track and how to maybe look at your kind of metrics in a I don't know, more useful way, right?
Yeah, different way.
But there's a lot that really needs that personalization and, having someone that's in the field, I think is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I want to kind of go off of that. So what are some of the nutrition strategies you've mentioned? I mean, and a lot of the clients that you work with, you do work with them on weight loss stalls and addressing that and just understanding that part of this journey. What are some of the best strategies that you encourage your clients to focus on, after bariatric surgery, especially if they're in like a weight loss stall or they want to address weight regain? What are some of the things that you focus on with your clients?
Yeah. So, and again, I really like to start with kind of going to like the beginning and saying, where do you want to go? Right. And why is that important to you? I think that sometimes when people are a little bit farther out, maybe they have already reached certain milestones that have been really monumentous to them, but now they're kind of, where do I go now? Right.
Yeah.
Or maybe they never reached certain goals, or maybe their goals have changed. And so I always like to start off and really dive deep and discuss like, what do you want? Where do you want to be in 6 months? Where do you want to be 12 months? Where do you want to be in, like long term? What do you want that to look like? Because the way in which we get there is really, we have to take into account obviously the end point, but then also thinking about your preferences and your lifestyle and, all of those special components too. So we always start there. But I would say that, when it comes to matters of regains or stalls or, just wanting to lose more in general, I really like to kind of map out and talk about, what are your challenges right now? What are your struggles when it comes to being able to meet even just the bariatric basics, right?
Yep.
And that's usually where we start is how can we make sure that those fundamentals are in place, Are you getting your protein in, right? Or has that piece slipped away, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people think that they have to start with, how do I cut out all these things? How do I go back and cut out the carbs and reduce my calories? And I really like to think about the nutrition by addition kind of mindset, right? So instead of thinking about all the things that we want to cut out, let's focus on all the things that maybe we want to make sure that we're actually doing, right? Exactly. And get those fundamentals in place. So we spend a lot of time talking about, of course, the bariatric basics, are they eating their protein? Are they eating consistently throughout the day? Are they maybe skipping meals because they're busy or just because they don't think about it, right? So a lot of those fundamentals, getting your water in, your supplements in, your protein in, trying to fit in more balance in your day. I always like to start there. But of course, too, there's the challenges that come up, right? So how do we make sure that we're eating well by maybe planning ahead, prepping, right? Some strategies around that. And then, of course, just like the challenges that come from kind of the head hunger or emotional side of it, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe you have every intention to eat in a certain way, but you're really struggling with stress eating, right? Or night eating. And so we'd want to kind of dive into those too. But again, like not all of my clients are, have the same challenges. And so it's really important to, as I'm sure that you do with all of your clients too, is like talk about what's going on.
Right.
So we kind of know what do we want to work on and where can we maybe optimize and change too.
Yeah. I know. I feel like, that old saying, like Rome wasn't built in a day. Like when I get folks, I actually have a very similar philosophy. I actually have a pyramid that I kind of base off my, kind of how I work with folks. The bottom of the pyramid, guess what? Bariatric basics, right? We can't layer on sports nutrition, guidelines and things if we aren't even meeting our bariatric basics, right? Yes. If we're not meeting our protein intake, if we're not drinking enough fluids and we're getting dehydrated because we're sweating a lot, that's a problem, right? And so I do the exact same thing. And for folks that are listening, I think sometimes when people see this kind of shiny object online, like, when you see things like you can lose 30 pounds in whatever, it's like, no. Oftentimes we need to look at just, are we doing the basics first? Because again, you can't layer on other changes and optimizations if we can't even do, the basic things, which is eating on a consistent schedule, protein, getting your fluids in, taking your vitamins, are we eating slowly? Are we separating food and drink? Things that, yeah, we've all know, but like you're saying, over time, when people come back to work with you, it's usually folks that are down the road farther, and maybe other habits have creeped in, and those basics have slipped, maybe away for whatever reason. And, there may be various reasons for that. But I think no matter the area and really, goals, I would say that establishing the bariatric nutrition basics is a great starting point. And then you can dive into other areas that, can help you to reach your whatever that goal might be.
Yeah. Yeah. I just find there's so much value in that because, and it seems so easy on paper, right? And it's not, I always tell people, I know it's like not sexy. Like it's not like,
exactly.
Right? Like it's just like, oh, I know I should be doing this. Right. And it just seems so easy on paper, or they've heard it so many times that it doesn't seem so flashy anymore. Like it's not trendy. Right. And so, and I totally get that. Like, but there's so much value in it that once people actually start getting back into those basics and feeling, maybe they're not like seeing huge changes in like their weight or their body or anything, but they start feeling it right away, then that starts to impact everything else. Right.
Establishing little small wins each week builds momentum, and then we can start making bigger changes, I know. Cause of course, right away, I'll get questions like, for example, the pyramid that I use, the tip of my pyramid is like supplements or ergogenic aids for whatever their training goals might be. Yeah. And a lot of times, folks right out of the gate will be like, okay, should I be taking creatine? Should I be taking, whatever, extra whey protein? And you know what? Again, I go, let's first look at your intake, because we don't want to add in any additional supplements until we know that your diet is solid, your intake each day, your timing around meals, are you taking in the right ratios of carbohydrates and proteins around your workouts, et cetera. Then we'll talk about the supplements and kind of the things that, maybe are more shiny that we see online quite a bit. We tackle those things down the road. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, just because I oftentimes just see that, like, let's just focus on the very end, but we got to start at the beginning first, right? We got to put those building blocks in place before you can keeps taking those steps forward, and it'll happen, but you got to start with where you're at.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously marketing is like, can be great around some of these things too, or like just with the bariatric community these days, and, having everything on social media. I mean, when I started, kind of dabbling in things on social media, there really wasn't like, the bariatric community did not exist like it does now. Right.
Yeah.
And, and so it's been great to like see that evolve, but I've also seen, everyone is kind of comparing themselves to other people, or like trying to get inspiration about, oh, this person is doing it this way, or this person's doing it that way. And I get it. It can be really easy to see somebody else like using a supplement, or to be following a certain eating plan, and to just feel like I need to do that too. Right.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
There can certainly be programs and products that can be fantastic, but when you're just kind of following somebody because they're doing that and they're seeing results, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's like the best approach for you. Right.
Exactly.
And maybe their health needs, their goals are completely different than yours. And so the strategy in which, you need to get to where you want to go could look different. But no matter what, it's like starting with those basics is like always step one, in my opinion. Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. Weight regain, whether that's, weight regain, stalls, whether that's trying to achieve some training goals. I mean, whatever, all of those things start with establishing basics, and we go from there. Yeah. And I was going to say too, other things that I kind of also, will hone in on too is just, when we're starting and we're building on these things, it takes time to see. Sometimes it takes time to see these changes. Like, for example, when you say, hey, we're going to work on, establishing the basics, and then we're going to look at other things. It's going to take some time to, see changes and results. And I always just remind folks that, things take time. And, just because you're not seeing maybe the number on the scale, which is something that we all can, go to and look at, it doesn't mean that what you're doing is is wrong. You know what I mean? You're establishing some new habits that are going to help in the long term. And you got to just stick with it. It's the consistency that I know I push with my clientele with movement goals or with their nutrition goals. It's that consistency day in and day out, even when it's not super fun or glamorous or the shiny object, that is really the key in reaching whatever that goal is that they're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And I think, for a lot of my clients, I spend also a lot of time talking about the process of change, right? Yeah. We're not really taught too much about how to change. We might be given like some guides on what to do, but like that process of change, we're not always discussing or we're not always hearing about. And so, from potentially past attempts with anything, maybe you've tried things and you've gotten like some type of immediate result from it. And that is attractive, right?
Totally.
But that could also be maybe a method that is not healthy or not sustainable, right?
Yep.
And so when we're really thinking about our goals, right, and digging deep, if our goals are really to, potentially lose weight or improve our health or to reverse disease or to prevent disease. I mean, we're talking about long-term types of goals. And so the results that we see in the beginning, they might be more immediate in terms of like our energy or, other factors or whatnot.
But
our sleep, but really to see lasting change, like change over time that sticks, we have to set up some really strong fundamental pillars. Yep. And it's, I think that's always hard when people are putting in a lot of time and energy and effort and, they don't get to see or feel or have the result right away,
Totally. I totally agree.
It's like a mindset thing, right? And so having like a coach though, or having somebody that you're working with though, to really just continue to remind you that you're on the right track, right? And it will pay off. I think it's really, really valuable. I think we all need that. But I think we all kind of fall into that, like, myself included, like that shiny object syndrome, right?
Yes.
I want it and I want it now.
Yes. I want to do this and I want to achieve this goal tomorrow. Yes. No, I totally get that. And that kind of brings me to what I wanted to dive into too, which is nutrition myths that you and I probably have seen over the years or that, maybe you hear frequently. And I want to kind of ask you like of a nutrition myth, and then maybe we can talk about how we would address it, for example. So for example, pouch reset diet. So if someone comes to you and they're like, hey, Megan, I just want to get out of the stall. Do you recommend a pouch reset? What would you say to that?
So the first thing I always want to tell people is like, I get it. Right? Totally. Like I get it. I get why you're going to that. Right?
Yes.
I get that you've heard about it and it seems maybe like logical to, you were having this weight loss in the beginning and it was pretty fast and it was pretty consistent. Like, why not go back to that point in time and try to replicate that? Right.
Yep.
But I then like to tell people the science and the reasoning to why it actually isn't. The pouch reset isn't a thing. Like there's no science behind it. It's really when you're thinking about going back to the beginning, you're thinking about this time when, first of all, you were also a different size, right?
Right.
But you were, you were on a liquid diet because you just had this major surgery done.
Yes.
And you had swelling, you had inflammation, right? There was a lot of change going on hormonally and then also physically to your body. And so you were eating very, very, very few calories and you were on a liquid diet because you were supporting that healing process of your stomach, right?
Right.
Then obviously you progress your diet over time and you are, that swelling and inflammation is subsiding and you're able to eat more over time and kind of get to like a, quote unquote, normal, like bariatric capacity. But it's not that like the liquid diet or like, was what shrunk your stomach, right? It's not like going back to that is going to like reset your stomach to that size. It's not resetting your hormones. If anything, it's kind of playing back into that diet mentality of let me restrict myself, right? Let me cut out all food groups, all foods. Let me go back to shakes. Let me try to cut my calories way, way down. And, you know, usually the pouch reset is a few days to like a week or so. And you know, then what?
Then
right?
What? Exactly. And then what? Yeah. And I want to go off of that. Like, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you actually look at what the pouch reset diet is doing, or whatever you want to call it, you're basically just severely restricting calorie intake, right? Which includes also protein and carbohydrates. So like for those of like people that I work with, you know, I'm like, why would we want to do this? Because you're going to sacrifice your muscle, because guess what? Your body's going to say, okay, wow, this is super restricted. You're not giving me the nutrition I need. I'm going to just start breaking down some of this muscle tissue as well to be able to fuel, you know, my body. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to you've significantly reduced overall intake. And then what? Because then after that 7 days of being like, oh my God, this was really hard, or, you know, challenging or whatever, then you go back to eating, you know, more like a regular intake. And then the number on the scale might bump back up. And then it's like this cycle that just keeps having to be repeated to, you know, see some number on the scale be lower, but then it goes back up. So then we do something else kind of, you know, restrictive. And I just see it to be kind of a vicious cycle that, you know, at the end of the day isn't really ultimately getting you to what you want, which is, you know, maybe it's just, I do want to lose a little bit more weight. Well, let's look at it from a whole picture perspective of your intake, your movement, your sleep, your stress level. I mean, there's so many factors that, you know, your medical conditions, you know, your blood sugar control. I mean, there's so many things that can impact that number on the scale that, you know, that's 5 to 7 day severe restriction of intake isn't ultimately getting you to a sustainable, you know, weight loss, you know, pattern, so to speak.
Yeah. And, you know, I get it though. Like people have tried programs where they restrict and then they see a result. And so it plays into that logic that like for me to be successful, I have to keep eating as little as possible. And, you know, what's unfortunate is that a lot of individuals are not really taught like how their body works or how metabolism works. Right. And so we get into these routines of, to get where I want to be, I need to eat less or cut out carbs or cut out entire food groups and follow this and to be quote unquote good as long as possible. But ultimately we kind of all know where that ends up. Right. And it's obviously really hard to maintain. And then when people are that strict, right, and they end up maybe kind of veering in a different direction, they really haven't learned sustainable ways to support themselves. And it's only natural for then their body to kind of, you know, start heading in a different direction. So it's very attractive. I completely understand why people are interested in the idea of it, you know? But, you know, I also love that they ask before they do it.
Yes.
Like, is this something I should do? Because I mean, knowledge is power, right? I mean, and I want people to understand not just like what to do, but why they're doing it. Right.
100%. Yeah.
So,
because that's the real nugget that, then you can take this and apply this information to other situations or times down the road, you know, when your goals might change, you can go, oh, I understand why I did this before. And now I can apply this to this new goal or situation. And you can, you know, do that at that point, you know? I'll give you another one that I know you and I will definitely go back and forth, you know, no carbs after bariatric surgery, you know, I can't eat carbs for the rest of my life. You know, what are your thoughts on that? Because of course, you know, I have certain thoughts too. How do you kind of go about that? You know, because I'll just say this caveat too, like you're saying with the pouch reset, like I understand why, you know, someone's had bariatric surgery, overall intake is reduced. So of course the focus is on protein. We know how important that plays in our bodies, hormones and muscle and metabolism, et cetera. Obviously, super important to keep protein, you know, paramount. But I don't know, you know, if you've heard this as frequently as I hear this, just because of the nature of the folks that I work with. But, you know, basically saying, you know, very minimal carbs for life, you know, keep it as low as possible. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh gosh, carb. I tell people, I joke, I'm like, it's like a 4-letter word that you're not supposed to say, you know?
Right.
Like,
totally.
No. And it's really confusing to people because
Yes.
obviously maybe they've been on low carb diets in the past, maybe that
Sure.
was keto or some form of that, and they were maybe successful. Maybe those were diets that were given to them by their doctors, right? So, and then of course, when you're newly post-op and you're so protein focused, right? You're really not eating carbs and you're told to kind of stay away from those. But I honestly find that for my clients who are really successful long-term, it's really all about balance. And everyone's carb needs are going to look different, right? And for a lot of the individuals who you work with, I'm sure their carb intake is much higher than somebody who's like 3 months post-op, right? And so it's not to say that like, we're saying, eat carbs, eat as many as you want, eat them like that, right? Yes. I think that's where people fall into that like all or nothing. It's like, if I can either not have carbs, or if I'm told that I can have carbs, that's like, then like I'm just going to eat carbs, right? And that's not really what we're saying. And so your carb needs are going to be, they're going to be different from person to person, but also the types of carbs that we're usually talking about, including are going to be, specific as well. Right. But really making sure that, and again, it really ties down to like those goals too, because I have clients, how they use their carbs even, right, can look different. For example, I often will tell my clients about, eating balanced meals and having, some protein and carbs and fat at their meals. But I also have clients who have to be very specific about eating only carbs right before their workouts, right?
Exactly.
And being able to utilize that carbohydrate fuel specifically during their workout. And they're not eating that necessarily in the presence of proteins and fats. And so how many carbs, when you eat them, what types you eat. I mean, but yes, I mean, carbs are so important after surgery, and they're such a great way to, and actually our body's preferred way for energy, but they're really, really important. And carbs are how you get your fiber in, right? That's how you
B vitamins.
I mean,
absolutely.
There's so much value to them.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I agree with you in so many ways, just because I think like you said, it's that all or nothing mentality where, for example, someone might come to me and be like, is it okay if I eat carbs? I'm doing all this. And I'll say, just like what you're saying, everybody is going to be very individualized. I have some athletes that don't need as many carbohydrates because of the types of movement that they do doesn't demand that much carbohydrate to fuel their movements, right? It might depend on their intensity level, their duration or frequency, the type of movement they're doing, for example, versus someone that, maybe they do need more because they're training for a marathon, or I have someone right now that's training for an Ironman. Their carbohydrate needs are significantly more elevated. And I think that where you have to really be individualized and really strategize, especially on this particular, the carb myth out there, is that yes, it is going to be highly dependent on what you are doing, what phase you're in, what you're training for. In my case, with my individuals. But I wanted to touch on too, what you were saying too. When we say like, yes, incorporating carbs, it's good. We're talking about, like whole grains, fruits, vegetables, dairy, beans, legumes, like great heart, very healthy, good for you, providing fiber and nutrients and color to your plate and enjoyment. Because honestly, what I find too, and I don't know if this is something that when you're working with folks that have had some regain, I find two things happen. Number one, when my clients are not eating enough carbohydrate, of course, they might feel more fatigued. They're really snacky feeling, like by the mid to day to later in the evening, they are really hungry. Because if they're just doing protein or, heart healthy fats, like maybe they're just doing like avocado and like chicken or, like where it's just, they're really trying to keep carbs low. By midday, later in the day, especially if they've had activity in the morning, they are really hungry and their body is craving carbohydrate-rich foods. And you're basically going against your own body. That's very hard to maintain for a long time. You know what I'm saying? And in my case, I just find that, everybody's going to be different. Some people will need more carbs, the timing of them, but the types of carbohydrates matter. And I feel that they play a very important and, necessary role in your intake for life down the road. Yes, will they be suppressed the first, 3 to 6 months, maybe up to a year after surgery? Sure, because you can't take in that much. Got to keep our protein in, the first thing. But after that, let's see what we can do. And we can do it incrementally where we don't just say open the floodgates and let's just go carb crazy and like load up on carbs, right? We're saying, look at your plate. Where do they fit in? How much can you tolerate? And we build from there. You know, that's kind of how I go about it. How about you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's like about those like the bariatric basics, right? Like let's make sure that we're checking off those boxes. Totally. And then let's also talk about adding those pieces into, because that's part of a balanced diet as well and provides so much benefit for so many different reasons. But yeah, there is kind of that like timing. There's the right time, there's the right, and so having a little bit more of that like personalized guidance can be really, really important. But when people add those in, how much they add in, what they add in, that can truly vary. And so when people come to me and they're like, can I do this? I'm like, we got to sit down and talk about all kinds of things to really map out what's going to be the best plan for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings me to my next question, which can be also kind of tied back to the nutrition myths thing. But I wanted to talk to you just because this is kind of an area of your expertise, which is, addressing like hunger, cravings after bariatric surgery and in folks that you work with. I noticed that with my clients, this can coincide. An increase in hunger or cravings can often coincide with when they're starting to move their bodies more, for example, which is completely normal. Having increased hunger and cravings is oftentimes because your body's like, hey, you're demanding a little bit more nutrition with the movement you're doing. But, what nutrition strategies do you recommend when folks come to you and they're like, yeah, I'm just noticing my cravings, my hunger is kind of increasing. Is that normal? What should I do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, like, hunger can be such a scary feeling for many people after surgery, right? Because they had this surgery with, kind of a lot of them have been told like, you're never going to feel hungry again, right?
Yes.
And so feeling hungry, whether that's even like immediately after surgery or, later on, it can be really scary because hunger can, in their mind, right, really mean struggle. If I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. And if I eat, I'm going to gain weight or I'm not going to lose weight, right? So there can be this like fear around hunger. And I always like to just remind people too that hunger is a very normal cue from our body telling us that we need fuel, right? Yep. But of course, none of us want to feel hungry all day long, right? Like we have stuff to do, right? We don't want to just like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with this like hunger ping. Like, no, we want to like eat and be satisfied and have energy and move on and do other things and go eat later. So I always tell people like the hunger is not something that I want you to fear. But if you feel like you're getting hungry, you're constantly hungry, or you have this, just like insatiable type of appetite, right? Then yes, we definitely want to talk about how can we manage things so that, that can be reversed. And so I always like to tell my clients, again, kind of going back to those basics, like we want to make sure that you have a really great protein source at your meals, and not just like you're grabbing, half a string cheese, some really good protein at your meals. And usually, that might look like 2 to 3 ounces or so, maybe like 15 or 20 grams worth for, at least my clients. That's like I think a really great starting point. And then making sure that if you do have the room that we're building other things and putting other things on your plate too. So that might be like a fiber source, some healthy fats, give yourself some color, some texture, some flavors, right? Really make that satisfying so that not only is like your fullness cue met and you can go maybe 2, 3, 4 hours before your next meal, but you're also feeling really satisfied as well, right? Yeah, exactly. So I really tell my clients, like if you're getting hungry, 30 minutes, an hour, even 2 hours after you've eaten, we should probably go back and look at, are you eating enough? And are you getting a good balance of foods too, to really support, that fullness and satiety between meals? But some of my clients, again, maybe this is what they just kind of assume, or maybe they've been told that like, maybe they only need to eat 3 meals a day, right? Or maybe they should never feel hungry. And so I always do like to really normalize the fact that if you're a surgery patient, you're probably going to be eating more than 3 meals a day. And hunger is, is not uncommon. But we just want to make sure that you're not feeling constantly hungry, that you have this like nice cadence to when those cues pop up for you. But I definitely find that, trying to start your day off with a great protein source, a really balanced meal, trying to eat kind of in regular rhythms, especially if you don't get hungry, right? So still trying to eat like on a schedule.
Pattern.
Yep. Yeah. And, just really trying to listen to your body and like what works well, right? If I eat this type of meal, how long does this last? How much energy do I have? How do I feel? Because we want to also tap into that information so that we learn from it. We keep repeating what works for us too. Right.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can't agree with you more. Like I literally say those exact same things, going back, looking at previous meals and seeing timing, what did you have, how much of each, different types of foods on the plate. Cause we know protein and fiber will make us feel full longer, heart healthy fats, things like that. And I often find too, of course, for my folks that like work out first thing in the morning too, especially if they've relied on like a liquid meal, so to speak, like a protein shake, I find that they might say that they're starting to feel hungry sooner, as the day goes on. And what I have had, with my clients, our conversations will be like, well, sometimes maybe a shake isn't enough for you. That liquid might, more rapidly transit out. And so therefore you're hungry sooner. Yeah. And that is why solid foods, use that tool of your surgical, your new surgical small stomach. Solid food is going to utilize that better. And it's going to tell the brain, hey, there's something in here longer as your body works to digest and empty it out. And that's going to lead you to feeling more full longer, And so the strategies that you're mentioning, I say the exact same thing. And I'll just add too, with my folks too, we look at timing around their workouts, because I oftentimes will get folks that have kind of breakthrough hunger during a workout, for example. Like they might be halfway through a workout and be like, oh my gosh, I'm either starving or I've hit the wall, right? Yeah. Because I haven't taken in enough prior to the workout, and sometimes it might even be the day before they, didn't eat on a consistent schedule, and that can carry over into the following day and into your workout. And so things that you can, for those listening, that you can look at is like you're saying, Megan, timing of your meals, the amounts and portions of protein and carbohydrates. Are you eating a balanced plate? Are you, maybe having more solid foods as compared to liquid meals to help with staving off that kind of feeling of hunger and kind of snackiness, and just being consistent about the timing. Because I will say this lastly, and then we'll move on. But folks, in my opinion, folks that oftentimes, aren't eating on a more consistent pattern of eating, they end up kind of struggling with this more because their body just doesn't know when is it going to get some food. And remember, your intake is already reduced because you've had bariatric surgery. So if you're then on top of that skipping or going long periods, let's say 4, 5, 6 hours without eating, your body's going to say, hey, red alert, I need some nutrition over here. And so I oftentimes find that my folks, if we don't have a set pattern, so to speak, and within, an hour or two of, a typical day, that's where those types of breakthrough hunger cravings and things really start to take over.
Yeah. And I mean, just to add to that too, a lot of people will tell me that they don't feel hungry all day, but then at night, that's like the worst time that they're really hungry or really snacky or have more of their cravings. And how do they, stop snacking at night? And I always tell people it's not about trying to like stop that habit or trying to like find a healthier option instead, it's really like we need to like actually go back and like revamp your whole day so that you're at a place where your body isn't now like just trying to get in everything that it didn't have all day long when it was running on fumes, right?
100%.
So a lot of times when people are really noticing that like evening snacking or really strong hunger, and they haven't really had much fuel all day, we just start by practicing like, let's start your day with a great breakfast and really try to build in small things throughout the day. Even if you don't feel hungry, right? so that we can get to a point where maybe evening time is a little bit, better managed.
Yeah. Yeah. By kind of putting it in the first part of the day, it helps to manage those later, struggles that, folks often have. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to combine these next two things. So you wrote a book, which by the way, I own, just so you know, I bought it because it's so fantastic. I just want you to know that I have it myself in my own library. So your book, The Complete Bariatric Cookbook and Meal Plan. And recently when we met at the bariatric retreat, your presentation was on, how to add flavor and nutrients to meals and, nutrient quality, et cetera, especially for someone that's had bariatric surgery. So I'm kind of combining these two topics. But first of all, tell us a little bit about, your book and what does it include? Who may benefit from it? Why did you feel the need to write it and what's included, so to speak?
Yeah. So writing a cookbook was always kind of on my bucket list, someday as a dietitian, someday I'm going to write a cookbook. But I was presented the opportunity to write a bariatric cookbook. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, please. Thank you. When can I do this?
Yeah.
And so, it was a challenging, but obviously great experience. And the cookbook is really, it's called The Complete Bariatric Cookbook and Meal Plan. And it's called Recipes and Guidance for Life Before and After Surgery. Very long title. But half of it is really about kind of the meat and potatoes of bariatric surgery. So it's really great for anyone who is pre-op, who is kind of looking to learn more about life post-op. And it's also great for those who are post-op and just kind of want that, extra information and guidance. And it goes through a variety of topics. But then the other half of the book is all about food and recipes. And so the recipes in there are, of course, protein focused, produce focused. But the idea is to make them easy. So, they're usually 10 ingredients or less. They use common ingredients that you can find at the store, right? And hopefully it's also things I've heard from a lot of people that their whole family likes them, the recipes too. So it's not just for, a specific type of person, although they are bariatric specific. Really anybody could have them. And even if you're pre-op, right? You could have a lot of these recipes too. And they can be modified. So you can swap out the protein source if you want to take a vegetarian recipe and add some type of animal protein to it or vice versa. They're really easy to kind of change up a little bit and modify. For some of the recipes too, I write them out where they're designed maybe for the pureed stage, but then it has extra recommendations. If you are farther post-op, these are things that you could add in to give it some more crunch and some more flavor. So a lot of the recipes have little tips of, guidance or how to use them or how to change them up to just to support, your taste preferences or your nutritional needs. But I'm all about the nutrition, right? Obviously as a dietitian, I could talk about nutrition all day, but I also just think food should be fun. And
totally. And taste good.
It should taste good. And so adding that satisfaction piece, I think is so crucial. A lot of people that I work with are oh, I'm so bored with food. I won't want to see another yogurt again. I don't want to see another string cheese again. And I'm I totally get it. Let's make this more interesting. And I think that what a lot of people are missing is they're hitting the nutrition marks. They're getting their protein in, maybe they're getting their fats and fiber in, fantastic. But sometimes they're missing that satisfaction piece. Yeah. Right.
They're looking forward to.
Yes.
Yeah. That they can share with others. Yeah. I totally agree.
And, so having texture, having color, having different flavors, we don't talk enough about, I feel we don't talk enough about that in this community. We're always talking about the numbers or the macros,
protein.
Right?
Yes, totally.
But how do you make it fun and how do you make it flavorful and satisfying so that you want to keep eating that way for a long period of time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think what I find, so a couple things that I loved about the book. I love that you have the different phases with different recipes for each phase, because I do oftentimes get folks that, have been through a surgical center that maybe just didn't really provide them with that information.
Yeah.
It was a very, 1 or 2 day meal plan, like, oh, by the way, here's your meal plan for the rest of your life. And it's like, what? And so what I appreciate really honestly about your book was the different phases, the recipes, the little tips on how to make things different or add protein or whatever. I found those to be so helpful, even as a dietitian, because I oftentimes get folks like, oh, can you give me some fresh ideas on this? And, I'm not someone that writes recipes or anything like that. So I'm oftentimes looking for resources. And I have found that your book, honestly, I'm being totally serious. I'm not just saying this because you're my guest. I really, really enjoyed your book. So I just want to say, awesome job. Like,
thank you so much.
To you. Yeah. So you guys, please go take a look, because now it's available on like Amazon and like, right? You can order it online, right?
Yeah. I mean, most
website
major retailers, Barnes & Noble, Target, Amazon. Yeah. It's all over the place. Yeah.
It's a beautiful book.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. It's awesome. No, seriously. It's a great resource for folks, no matter what phase they're in, truthfully, pre or post-op. So after we've had all this great discussion, can you tell people, how they can work with you, maybe a little bit about your business, how they can follow you?
Yeah. So if you're interested in working with me, if you're, pre-op or post-op, happy to help. I work, like I said, primarily with people one-on-one. I'm also going to be launching a program for anyone who is struggling with regain or just wanting to lose more weight, wanting to feel more confident in, their post-op approach. I'll be launching in June, so stay tuned. But you can find me on Instagram. I'm at My Bariatric Dietitian. My website is the same, just mybariatricdietitian.com. And feel free to reach out, say hello, send me a DM, send me an email. Like, I love just like hearing from people just in the community and meeting other people. So happy to help if anyone's looking for it.
Yeah. Oh, you guys, please give Megan a follow. You're so awesome, Megan. I'm so glad we had a chance to meet finally at Bariatric Retreat. It's so much fun to meet other, colleagues, other dietitians in our field. And I love your approach, and I love everything that you have on your Instagram, and certainly your book is an amazing resource. So you guys, please go check out Megan, give her a follow. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for chatting, Kim.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do it again anytime. I'm going to keep bringing on dietitians. I think it's so valuable to just get different perspectives, because I think what one clinic or dietitian might say, it may be, similar, or maybe there's some variety there, but it's always good to have other perspectives, I think, and to be able to learn from each other, for colleague to colleague, as well as for, folks that have had surgery. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Okay, you guys. Well, you can watch the full video of this podcast episode on my YouTube channel, the Active Bariatric Nutrition channel. So make sure to subscribe to it. Give it a like if you don't mind. And also, if you wouldn't mind, please share this podcast with someone that you think would find it helpful, and subscribe to it and give it a rating so it gets out in front of more folks, because the main goal of this podcast is to help educate and provide helpful information for you along your bariatric journey. You can also follow me on my social media, Instagram. I'm at Active Bariatric, as well as on my Facebook and TikTok channels. And if you'd like to learn more about my one-to-one bariatric nutrition coaching services, you can go to my website, which is activebariatricnutrition.com, and schedule a free discovery call so we can learn more about each other. And thanks so much for tuning in today, you guys. We'll do it again next week. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks.